think it's about that time. We'll get started. I think my colleague's going to kick it off with the slides, but Fred, if you're out there, let you take it.
Yes. Hey, Jason.
All right, there you are.
So this is your slide deck, right?
Yeah, I can just, if you want to just talk to it, I'll just tell me to page down when you're ready.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time today, this afternoon, this morning, this day. So my name is Fred Coe. I'm the Director of Sales for Graphical Networks. Joining me is my colleague, Jason Sherman. Jason heads up our customer support team at Graphical Networks. And yeah, I hope everyone's having a great day. So we're going to talk about a very exciting topic today, outside plant software. So the good, the bad, the ugly. So today's agenda, we're going to go through a quick overview. I believe we have 4 polling questions. Then Jason's going to go through our netTerrain outside plant demo real quick. Feel free to ask any questions. There is a Q&A button at the Zoom webinar. The Zoom, right? Yeah, and there's also a chat feature as well. So when Jason does the demo, I'll be going into the chat, answering any questions you may have. The Q&A we will go through towards the end of the webinar. And so for those who attend and go through it all 30 minutes, at the end, we'll email you later this afternoon, or actually immediately after this, a $15 DoorDash gift card. For those on the West Coast, that'd be perfect timing for your lunch today. For others, probably be tomorrow. And for those that are not in the US, you'll receive a link to choose a $15 reward from many different merchants and vendors from Tango. All right, Jason, the next slide. So what is outside plant fiber plant? It's a way to help document and track all your fiber connections. If there's usually a GIS map that's an overlay where you would follow street maps to lay out your fiber pathways, conduits, manholes. Usually has lat-long coordinates to automatically place like manholes or poles or towers. And that should basically show all the fiber connections. So what's the good, the bad, and ugly with these different options and the costs and the features? So there are several outside plant software vendors out there. I'm sure anyone that's actually actively looking for an outside plant software tool, you know who they are. Please do keep us in mind, Graphical Networks. So there's some solutions out there where the software is really good, but it's more catered towards a network carrier type network, as well as the price tag associated with it. That's the good. It's a very great tool. It's easy, like an OSS type tool. So it could be very unaffordable for many others. The bad, software that's affordable but deficient. This is where I would say a lot of customers that use Google Earth or Google Maps, they have the ability to lay out the fiber on the streets, which is great, but the inability to actually double click or go further down to see the actual strands, equipment inside buildings. So again, it's software that's very affordable, but again, it's very deficient in a lot of different features that may be needed in an outside plant tool. The ugly. So there are some tools out there that are affordable. Does a lot of the features that you're looking for. So they're very, actually the four is very deficient. All right, next slide. So what else is out there? So again, when we've seen from customers, organizations, tracking fiber plants, they either made their own homegrown database solution, spreadsheet that has every single connections out there, managing all the strands, visual diagrams, as well as Google Map type diagrams, Google Earth. So a lot of different scattered files everywhere. So what else is out there? So I'm gonna talk a little bit about netTerrain outside plants. It is a central repository. It's a client-server solution, meaning that you have one centralized place for all your users to actively look at the diagrams, make changes to the diagrams. netTerrain can be installed on your own premise. netTerrain is a Windows-based application, so you will need to install netTerrain on a Windows application, IIS web server. The backend database is the Microsoft SQL database server license. And then all you need is a standard HTML5 web browser. We also offer netTerrain SaaS as well for customers that want to say, oh, it's going to be so hard to provision new hardware, software licenses to get netTerrain installed. So we also offer netTerrain Cloud. So netTerrain is priced by a number of devices or objects placed on the diagrams. I'll have Jason show that to you in a demo. So we scale. We start off anywhere from $1,100 a year all the way up to unlimited devices. So it scales as your project scales. All right, next slide. Polling questions. Let me pull this up. All right, so I'm going to launch my first polling question. Why is documenting your fiber plant important to you? Are you trying to help manage the capacity of your fiber? Is it troubleshooting? Or are you trying to simplify the way you manage your cables? So I'll give this another 15 seconds. All right, I'll stop this. It looks like it's almost a neck-to-neck tie between troubleshooting faster and simplifying circuit management. So I'll end the poll. I'll share results. So it's almost a neck-to-neck tie between simplifying circuit management as well as troubleshooting faster. All right, I'll go through the next polling question. Launch. So how do you currently document your fiber plants? For those that attend the webinar, do you use spreadsheets, Visio diagrams, Google Earth, using any combination of those tools, another outside plant tool, other, or nothing at all? Actually, there should be another option here. Everything's all in my head. So I'll give this another 15 seconds. All right, I will stop this. I'll share the poll. So it looks like clear winner is a combination of tools, which is what we've seen too from the many organizations we talked to. Spreadsheets and Google Earth diagrams seem like this is the best combination that a lot of organizations use. All right, I'll stop sharing. I think there's like 2 more questions. So when you look at the asset plant diagrams, is there a particular GIS map that you guys favor or use predominantly? Is it Google Earth diagrams, Google Maps? Is it the Esri ArcGIS, OpenStreetMaps, or doesn't matter to me? Just give me a map that I can see and lay out my fiber. So I'll wait for 15 more seconds on this one. All right. Well, thank you for those who responded to it. I'll share results. Looks like the vast majority of people use Google Maps. And second is close to ArcGIS Online, which is the Esri product. So thank you for that. netTerrain currently, which I'm sure I'm still Jason's thunder, it currently supports OpenStreetMaps. And I believe in our next feature release this year, we're also going to be supporting ArcGIS Online as well as Google Maps. So you'll actually have 3 different maps of your choices to use in netTerrain outside plant. And last one. Are you actually seeking the outside plant solution? Whoops, sorry for that typo for the solution. All right, so I'll give this another 15 seconds. All right, I will end this now. Sherman results. So yeah, so perhaps down the road is definitely the favorite here, which is great. We have a lot of resources in netTerrain. If you go to our blog section, there's a lot of articles written about outside plants if you want to take a look at. In the resource center under Why netTerrain Resource Center, you can actually download some case studies from some of our customers about outside plants. So a lot of resources. You can go to our YouTube channel and take a look at all our outside plant videos. So I'll stop sharing. I'll exit the poll. All right, then the next slide, Jason, I believe so we're going to go through a very high level review of netTerrain outside plants. So if there are any specifics, please feel free to write them in the Q&A section, or if not, we can schedule a more in-depth demo for you and discuss your requirements. So with that being said, I'll pass it off to Jason. I'll be quiet now.
All right. Thanks for coming. I was actually here just for the free lunch, so just so you guys know. So on my screen is netTerrain, so I'm logged in. I'm actually in the future release version here in 9.5. This is actually pre-release, but it's pretty nice. It's got some stuff in here, so I'm just starting to use this now, which is cool. But I'm going to navigate through some diagrams. There's kind of pre-configured diagrams just to show as far as the demo goes, just so you guys are aware. Usually when you start off with netTerrain, you really start with like a blank piece of paper. So it's pretty much looks just like this. If I were to hide this object and you were to sign up for netTerrain, you'd basically be presented with white piece of paper. And how to use that, how to use netTerrain? Well, we have objects on the right-hand side. You start dragging and dropping stuff and placing it. You can, all these diagrams you see, in fact, most of these diagrams were built using Excel import. So you have options for mass importing data, doing things like data discovery, integrating with systems that you currently have, right? ServiceNow or SolarWinds or other tools. So I know there's always that question of, well, where do I get started? It looks like a lot of work, that kind of thing. So, but there are a lot of options out there as far as helping you populate diagrams and also automations to keep things up to date, right? So I'm going to jump into this particular diagram. This is just showing kind of a really high level. Obviously, you see a map here, state of Maryland, because it's where we are. And you got these long red lines. So those are representing basically long paths of fiber in this case. So pretty common outside plant. And I've got all these different universities across the state that are documented as far as, the connectivity back kind of to a core location, which in this case is my University of Maryland here. Go Terps. So I've just used that as an example. It's just something we'd like to use because Fred and I are alum. But navigating down, traditionally outside plant, usually you're trying to document obviously things that are outside plant. manholes, handholds, et cetera. But the primary goal is usually, hey, I need to show conduits or pathways or duct banks, et cetera. But ultimately, you want to get to the core of the matter, which is usually fiber cables. So for us, the way we really document these things is usually you'll have something that represents the path. I use something called pathway. It doesn't matter. You can use conduits, et cetera. In fact, I use kind of all those things. I also have conduits in the project because I may have multiple conduits that are in a pathway. So you basically create relationships or can create relationships. So for instance, you've got multiple conduits. I usually do multiple conduits to a path. And then inside the conduits, I'm going to have fiber cables and so on. So, but in the tool, it allows me to go in and actually see, if I'm looking at something like a conduit, what's inside the conduit. Well, in this case, I've got multiple cables, multiple 12, 24, 72 strand cables that are all assigned to that particular segment of conduit in this case. So let me back up here and clear my little drawing there. But the point is, you can create things like all these different buildings. So you have all these buildings. Fred was alluding to different maps, right? This is actually using a Google map. So you see the satellite stuff, which is kind of cool. You can switch this out. I can do a different layer. If I want to switch over to some other layer of map, I can switch it out. So pretty easy to do. And you can technically put in other maps. It's there's a configuration section where if you have a specific map, as long as it follows sort of the format that we follow, we know these particular ones are supported. That's what we test with. But these are all based around using tiles, XYZ type tile stuff. So OpenStreetMaps, that's pretty much a standard. And then we've got these other formats that are out there now with Google and as was mentioned, Esri Cloud. So anyway. When you are doing this type of sort of documentation, of course, you might do buildings, you might do manholes or handholds. What you're ultimately really getting down to, again, is fiber cables and how those fiber cables are connected. So if you're doing splicing, you may want to show devices that are basically splice boxes or splice cases. And then you might have fiber cables that are running into these splice cases, right? So like in this case, I've got these different fiber cables. The stuff in the upper right or the left-hand side, these are really just showing you that you have connections to another location. But the primary here is inside of the manhole, got my butterfly, and then I can see, I've got this device that's in the manhole. You can take pictures and upload those if you wanted to. But I can show the device, the fiber cable connecting to that device or device point, and even go into the device itself. So in this case, the splice box and then the actual splice cards. And this is also going to show you the strand or strands. This one actually has two strands. Strand or strands that are coming in and going out that are terminating to those ports in this case. This is acting basically, that middle connection is acting basically as your splice between the strands. So it's giving you that full kind of view. Now, when we use the terminology outside plant, it's a little kind of misleading because it's not just about outside plant, right? I mean, of course, you have outside plant from the standpoint of connections that are outside, but you also have inside because the fiber cable terminates to the building, but it actually typically terminates inside the building to at least a patch panel or some fiber distribution panel or something along those lines, I suppose. Oops, a little too far in zoom there. Sorry about that. So you might want to show not just the fiber cable along a pathway, but also the fiber cable if you're doing splicing, inside the splice cases or boxes or whatever it happens to be, along poles, et cetera, but also getting into the endpoint connections, right? So into the buildings, first floor, second floor, third floor, whatever it happens to be, where you happen to terminate. So in my case, a fiber cable might run inside and go up conduit and duct banks and all that stuff into something like a third floor to like a data center like I have here, right? So this is representing different racks. Now, you guys may not care about racks because you're really focused on outside plant. That's fine. You don't have to use the racks. That would be more DCIM. But in my example, I just happen to show that, and I happen to show these fiber cables and sort of the paths and so on. So I'm going to show some termination points here. of a basically a connection point. So this is a port on a device. So I'm just going to show you that. So here's a card that's in a chassis, right? And if I want to see the pathway for one of these ports, I can double click and it will generate what we refer to as a CLR. So we have two sort of physical path views for drawings. It can be a path like I want to show a CLR, which is the physical connection end to end. This one's pretty big, as you can see. So this is showing you the hierarchy versus physical path of connections from this building, this port of this device in this card, and then how it flows. How is the data going to flow out from there effectively? And this is all drawn sort of on the fly as I double click on a link or right click on a port or a device and say, hey, show me this thing. So this is the hierarchy. We call this the swim lane for obvious reason, because the blue swim lane. So that's the hierarchy, right? You got your port, card, chassis, etc. You got a port, card, chassis, rack, floor. This is a fiber patch panel that's basically jumping these together. And then this is an internal cross connect. And then you start to get into the outside world, because here I have a manhole and a splice box. So now I've got a strand out of a fiber cable, and it's showing me the path all the way to the end, right? So now I'm going end to end here. Let me move this down, and I'm terminating down to, let's say, the library here. So this is a view that can be generated automatically from the data in the system. Of course, you have to put the data in the system. So there's work to be done there. Obviously, that's not something simple if you don't have any data right now, because someone's got to document where all these cables and connections and so on are. So there's things you kind of got to get into there. So we do have other views besides this sort of CLR view. Obviously, we've got these physical connections and all these other things. Fred was alluding to, from a licensing standpoint, I'll just back up for a second since I'm here. These would be objects that you're seeing here. Like this would be a cabinet, that's one object. If you see devices in a chassis or a rack, these would all be individual objects as well. That's what we really kind of count in our licensing for the most part. We don't count subcomponents. So like all the cards I was talking about or the links themselves, they're not really part of the licensing, but objects, buildings, floors, rooms, those are things. But you also control all that. So you can decide how much you really want to document what's important for what you're trying to do. Troubleshooting was one of the big things, obviously. It might be asset management, capacity planning, all those things. You document what makes sense to fulfill those requirements, not more than what you need to do just because you can or because it looks neat, right? So kind of stick to the things you want to do. I have a lot of time left. So the other thing I wanted to jump over to is when you, one of the features of the tool, not everybody necessarily uses this or takes advantage of this, is something called the ACRA. It's basically an algorithm that can determine between, let's say, two buildings, if there is a possible circuit pathway, and it'll highlight that path and tell me which fiber cables or strands are available. And then I can name that circuit, and then it will be applied or made available in the tool. And sort of it's there, and it also takes strands out of the system. So once you've sort of named that that fiber cable or that fiber circuit, then it's there for you to see. So you can go in and actually view things on the map, and you can generate what we call the instead of a swim lane CLR, we call it a block CLR. And again, this one's a little big, so it'll take a second to generate. But the point is, you can get into actually showing all these different sort of views and have these circuit paths and so on available, which is nice. And this is I like this the block CLR, because it does show me the path at the top, but then it also shows me the equipment and then which ports are involved, which strand, the strand numbers, and so on. So it's kind of nice. But anyway, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to go see if there's any questions out there. So KMZ files, you can import KMZ files from, obviously it's typically Google Earth. You can, and it will, kind of throw the map up and put some information in. Usually it's more for reference. You can bring stuff in, and we will turn it into objects in netTerrain, but because they're so different systems, do the import, you check it out and see what you get. What I usually do is use it more as a reference, and then I'll kind of convert things over So licensing per seat, per rack, it's not per rack, it's really per object. So as I showed in my sort of demo, I was showing, buildings and floors and rooms. Those are all objects, servers, switches, etc. But what we don't, again, license subcomponents like ports and cards. We don't count that stuff, and we don't count like links themselves. So is it per user? It can be per user. Yeah, if you're talking about editors, and it also depends if you're hosting it yourself or we're hosting it. So that's where you should talk with sales about that. Yeah, per object. That's right. Line level losses and that sort of thing. You can record that. So DB loss and things like that. There is a place in the tool where you could record that if you wanted to. So for instance, let me go back to here, and I'll bring up hit back to project here. I'm going to bring up a fiber cable sort of interface, which I didn't really show. Let me see if this is a fiber cable. Let me go to my links. I'm going to turn off all these, and I'll just find a 12-strand fiber cable. So if I click on this guy, you'll see on the right, I got OTDR readings. You can actually add additional columns of data to like this is a strand interface. So this is all the strands for a 12-strand fiber cable for this particular 12-strand fiber cable. So you could add data there. You could add additional columns, all these objects. You can create your own objects in the catalog. You add your own data fields. There's really no limitation for the most part. I mean, probably more than you'd ever want, but so that, it's pretty flexible from the standpoint of how you set it up and how you might use it and configure things and so on. So
Jason, that's one other question I answered. Do they need to have the internet to use netTerrain outside plant?
Not necessarily. You can build your own, like in the case of OpenStreetMaps, you can build your own OSM server if you have. Depends on the technology you have internal. So if you don't have anything, like you don't have any mapping tools, you'd have to build an OSM server or something to serve up the maps, right? Now, keep in mind too, you don't need the dynamic maps to use outside plant. It's a nice to have, but you could technically load up a static map, right? Like an SVG file or a PNG that you load up. So it depends on your situation too, because if it's a small campus, oftentimes you don't necessarily need a dynamic map, because if it's a small enough campus, you'll get pretty good resolution out of just a static map. Outside plant for us is not just the maps, it's about the fiber cables and strands. So keep that in mind as well. But we're happy to talk to you about, what you guys are looking to do and whether or not you would need a internal server, OSM server, or something else that you might use. And I say, I don't know about Google and Esri as far as their sort of cloud tile solutions, if you can build something in-house for those. I know you can for OpenStreetMaps. So I know the answer to that. But all right, guys, thanks. Any other questions? We have like 3 minutes. If there's anything else you want me to, if you have any more questions you want to pop in.
Actually, Jason, would you mind putting up the slide deck again one more time?
Oh yeah, sure. Let me share my screen again for this slide deck. I think that's the one you want. Polling questions. So discover more. You want that one, Fred?
Yeah, that and the next slide. So again, my name is Fred Coe. Any questions? Feel free to email me or my colleague Fred Young. And then if you actually want to try out netTerrain, we have a 14-day free trial. It's on a different website. It's netTerrain.us. So please don't go to graphicalnetworks.com. It's actually our cloud site, netTerrain.us. If you do need to download the software, we would need to schedule like a 30-minute meeting with Fred Young, who is my colleague. So again, we do offer both on-premise download as well as a free 14-day online trial. Again, our blogs, sorry, it was I touched too fast, but we do have outside plant articles. So if you go on the graphical.networks.com, what is the website? I should know this by now.
That's all right.
If you go to blog news, click on netTerrain blog, and under topics, just hit the outside plant, and you'll see all our blogs about fiber plants.
There's also a white paper up there too, I think, for or a couple for fiber as well.
Right.
Outside plant type stuff. So that's good to check out. And about the 14-day trial too, you don't need a credit card or anything. You just go kick the tires a bit. It'll set up an instance for you. It's really just a email address, and you'll set up a password and stuff.
All right. Well, that's where we are now. 31 past the hour. So thank you everyone for your time. Appreciate it. I hope this was useful. We will follow up with an email, I'm sure. So if you have any questions, feel free to ring us or reply back to the email. And
Okay.
we will again be sending you the gift cards just within the hour. So I'll make sure that that's sent to everyone that attended today. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye.